It's time for the main event. Here comes the breakdown. Act 1, the setup.
Our film begins by reminding us that New York City is a goddamn nightmare. Or at least it was in the early 90s. Nick Cage, or should we say Frank Pierce, and his partner, played by the legendary John Goodman, race across town in their ambulance while Frank monologues about how he used to be great at his job, but has lost his edge and just needs a few slow nights followed by a few days off. Which is exactly what I want to hear out of the guy who's coming to save my life. I used to be really good at this. Martin Scorsese does his best dispatcher voice, as we mentioned before, as he tries to get help for a woman who is going into cardiac arrest from having a roach crawl into her ear. While our heroes race upstairs to try and save our film's MacGuffin, Mr. Burke.
We got Mr. Burks.
We find out this man stopped breathing 10 minutes ago, but has no trouble blinking when Nick Cage's stethoscope bounces off his face a couple of times.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I was like, this dude's blinking. He's blinking the whole time they're lowering him to the floor.
One complaint I had throughout this entire thing is this dude is supposed to be like completely just unconscious, nothing going on, and every time you see him, he's just looking around like nothing's going on there. Like, they perform CPR on this poor bastard while Frank creepily eyes this dying dude's daughter through the whole thing. He explains in a monologue that he recently has come to believe that he can tell when a spirit leaves the body and doesn't want to be put back. Which, of course, comes into play later in the film. Also, something you don't really want a paramedic to be thinking. Yeah, this guy doesn't want to come back. No, save me, Jesus Christ.
That there is that cool juxtaposition in this movie, though. I don't know about cool, but that was something like the sole job of a paramedic is to stabilize and keep you alive enough till you get to the hospital. And his totally flipped it on his head, and he's like, I'm basically around to just let people die.
I'm just here as a grief mop. Nothing seems to work on him until Frank comes up with the bright idea to crank some Sinatra, which instantly causes old man Burke to jump back into his body. I know weird shit happens, but I just don't think that the Sinatra played any part in that. They take Mr. Burke to the shittiest, dirtiest nightmare hospital in New York, which has a mosh pit of injured people and nut jobs filling up the lobby, blocking the way of the paramedics who are nearly turned away because there are too many patients there already.
Like the lobby of this hospital is like prison, like what's it, like onboarding or what's
like
the
the
word
detention, like a detention cell.
Like when you
dudes
bring people to jail.
Oh, like a booking cell. Processing,
booking. That's what I was thinking of.
You got that dude puking in the middle of the freaking lobby there, and everybody's just walking by. Like, oh, that's normal.
That's fine. I feel like each other. I'm at least hoping this is an exaggeration, because Jesus
I feel like
Christ.
It wasn't.
I feel like
it was way too intentional to be an exaggeration. I feel like this was like they were trying to actually show this is what shit was like when this was written.
If you ever needed a reminder as to why you should never move to New York, just pop this movie in for like 5 minutes. It'll do the trick. I swear to God. I mean, maybe things have changed. Everything's gentrified now compared to what it was, but Jesus.
Completely like apathetic nurse who's just like, oh, well, while you were smoking crack and you passed out, maybe you should have just freaking died. Like, why is that our problem?
How's that our problem? You filled yourself full of drugs.
Oh, you got drunk and you fell down the stairs? Why is that our problem? Should let you die.
Maybe drink less.
A cop who inexplicably talks about himself in the third person through the entire film, named Gris, opens the door directly onto some dude's bloody foot. As a cokehead begs for help to a completely dismissive nurse, like we were just saying. A crazy dude screams for water, and another noose tells Frank to fuck off and take this dying old man and chuck him in the dumpsters. Or, something to that effect in her own words. The doctor explains that this old man is already plant food and says he doesn't have the time or space for this guy, but then lists off every single patient by name in the hospital, one by one, including a couple of dudes hooked on a new drug called Red Death, which is a mix of heroin and an amino acid or something. Gotta love those amino acids.
Yeah, we gotta stay healthy.
He then introduces Frank to Noel, the guy who is begging for the glass of water, and explains that this crazy son of a bitch drank so much water that if he has any more, he could die. Which prompts the guy to immediately untie the restraints from this nutcase who runs into the lobby, knocking down Nick Cage and a little kid in the process. So he can get a little swig from the fountain. I hated Noel through the whole thing. It just kept coming back, and I'm like, oh, just pick someone else. I understand we're doing a microcosm of like different people, but you don't just drive around New York fucking city and run across the same guy over and over and over and over again.
Well,
Actually, they probably would. Yeah,
they're supposed to be, but
so they probably would.
Yeah.
They probably would. I mean, especially with like the mentally ill, they probably do get called out to treat the same people over and over.
Because they're not locking them up; they're just taking them to the hospital, make sure they're not dying, and then they stick them back out and they do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
The daughter Frank has eyes for, Mary, says she also knows Noel. What a coincidence, from the neighborhood. And after he is thrown out of the hospital like a cartoon character, they have a quick heart-to-heart about her dying dad. Not her and Frank. Her and the original H2O Hydra homie, Noel. Who hugs her and then runs into the night in a hospital gown and possibly on his way to water-induced death. But, whatever. Let's let him go.
He's not the hero we deserve. He's the hero we need.
Hydro Man.
Frank and John Goodman, or Larry, jump back into the ambulance and take a wrong turn down flaming garbage can, pregnant prostitute, junkie road.
Yeah, the open air hooker market.
Frank has a vision of a girl with a shitty lip ring, from here on known as Rose. I couldn't tell if it was a lip ring or just like a scar on her lip, but it was very distracting.
Yeah.
While John Goodman snaps back into his Fred Flintstone voice for some reason.
Boy, some partner you are, Frank. I could have walked there faster. I'm starving and you stopped to talk to hookers.
I don't know if you guys noticed that, but it was like, he kept kind of going back into Fred. Barney. Before
his character was confusing.
Yeah. Before Frank flips on the sirens so they can rush to get Chinese food. Which they do by driving super slowly. I don't know if you noticed that. They flipped on the sirens, everybody scattered out of the way, and they drove about 5 miles an hour down the road.
We only have this section of the street to drive down. You guys can't speed down it, so
just take it slow. We're on a steady cam here. Meanwhile, some 70s Rolling Stone-ish music drones on in the background, as it does in damn near every scene of this movie. I know that's Martin Scorsese's thing, but fucking A, it was just...
There's one part that I actually took a note, where like an REM song plays.
Yeah.
And the subtitles just say rock music indistinct. And that's what instead of like all the other songs have like lyrics, like the subtitles will say the lyrics and stuff, but when it's an REM song, it's like indistinct rock music, which I think summarizes REM pretty well.
To a T.
I don't know what the hell Michael Stipe's saying, just
something about AIDS, I guess. Frank has a series of visions of Rose on the street and monologues that it's been 6 months since he lost her on a call, and that she was an asthmatic homeless girl. He goes on to say that her ghost won't shake from his mind and has made it impossible to block out all of the other people that he's lost along the way as well. So he's being haunted by this one particular vision, but it's making all the other, horrible things that he's seen come to light, which comes in pretty heavy. A lot of times, I feel like throughout the movie, when they're showing random people on the street, which they do a lot, it's not clear whether or not that person's actually there or this is something that Frank has experienced or somebody that he's lost along the way. Larry gets excited when he hears a call about a fire on the fire department's radio channel, but Frank, looking sunken-eyed like he hasn't slept in weeks, seems hesitant to push it and go somewhere where he'll have to witness more horrors. Larry and Frank tussle over the radio as Frank explains that he's completely burnt out by the job. No shit. Just look at his face, man. I mean, he doesn't want to go intentionally to a place where something bad could happen, and he's a paramedic. Like, that's their whole job.
That's what I thought was interesting. They're like picking and choosing the calls they want to go on.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's a thing that really happens, but
Probably.
it would make sense if it is, I guess.
I would assume, yeah. Maybe, you've already gone through some pretty traumatic stuff for the night. You'd be like, wait, and let them send it to some other ambulance or something. I could totally see that happening. Probably with police officers, too. They get a call to attend to a drunk regular instead, much to Frank's delight, who happens to be a pants half down, drunk homeless dude who smells like if shit threw up in dog puke and set itself on fire. I'm guessing. just by the fact that they're like leaning out the window for the stink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're Ace Ventura in it.
At the hospital, Frank runs into Mary again, where she explains that the doctor doesn't think her father will make it because he was dead for too long before they resuscitated him. Which I guess we kind of left out, but like he says that he locked himself in the bathroom when he was starting to have a heart attack, and that's why it took him. Yeah. Because I don't know,
they had to break the door down.
Yeah, the family had to figure out like what was going on, and so he was dead already in the bathroom, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this isn't all Frank and Larry's fault. Larry and Frank head out again. Larry catches some Z's while Frank stares at him intensely and monologues about how miserable he is doing this job, that he drinks constantly and just wishes that he could sleep peacefully like Larry is. They get a call about a suicidal male who happens to be Captain Hydro himself, Noel again, covered in blood and threatening to kill himself with a broken bottle on the street. Noel shakes blood on Frank like a dog and then runs into the street so he can get run over. Frank comforts him with promises that if Noel goes with them to the hospital, he'll make sure that someone in the ER kills him. Aww.
Maybe not entirely a lie.
Yeah,
given what we know of that ER.
Yeah. Either with pills or an injection or gas, which peps Noel right up because I think he picks pills, right? Pills.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wants pills.
I think we'd all pick pills, yeah. Backup arrives in the form of Tom Sizemore, who is Frank's ex-partner and a huge douchebag who immediately threatens to kill a clearly insane person. Tom explains that Noel had a couple of priests held hostage with a screwdriver a while back and told him after the incident that if Noel was ever caught making trouble again, he'd kill him. Which comes into play later. Seems like this Noel guy is a real pain in everybody's ass.
A little drain on society.
You know how all paramedics are just violent sociopaths?
Yeah.
You know that old chestnut? Yeah.
I thought that was just Tom Sizemore.
Maybe it's just Tom Sizemore. Tom Sizemore being Tom Sizemore.
Yeah.
I mean, the character's name is Tom.
It is Tom.
True.
I thought that was funny. Like, Tom, just be yourself. If you're a little high when you show up, that's fine. If a few punches land, just pretend it's your wife.
And that was the last one cage at a time they ever published.
Anyway, Tom hops in the ambulance and beats the shit out of Noel, while Frank kind of just says, "Don't do it, Tom," half-heartedly, while REM plays cheerfully in the background for some reason.
Indistinctly.
So that was so funny. He's like kicking this homeless person in the face, and REM is just like happily playing in the background. Happy, shiny people being beaten to death. This scene is rudely interrupted by a call on the radio for a shooting, which gives Tom a raging murder boner. So he gives Noel one last kick to the face and takes off. Neither Frank nor Larry give a shit whatsoever that another paramedic just about crushed a homeless lunatic's skull in the back of their fucking ambulance.
Yeah. Spattering blood everywhere.
Tom's great because he's like, "Oh, we could do that. Yeah, we could do that. You and I, we could double team this double shooting." Like, gets all jacked up.
Yeah, he's all excited.
He loves it.
He loves it, man.
Yeah.
They arrive at the scene of a gang shooting where a dude drops some of that Red Death stuff, which is immediately picked up by some guy walking by. I feel like that's a very realistic thing. Like, his hand opens up, drops the drugs, and then he's there to just pick it up and go. You gotta love those amino acids, man. In the ambulance, Frank tries to save this poor gunshot victim while Noel leans over the guy's face and drips blood on him. Exactly how I want to go out.
Yeah.
The dying guy wants Frank to hold his hand, so he hands it to Noel instead of holding onto the hand. Here, hang onto the hand of this fucking insane lunatic who's got blood all over him. Just don't call an ambulance for me, guys, ever. Just jump in the car and take me yourselves.
Better off, yeah.
This guy dies feet from the hospital, and Noel again runs off into the night to splash blood on people during the height of the AIDS epidemic. No thought was given to that whatsoever. It was just like, this guy's just covered in blood. Next, we meet Soul Man Ving Rhames, who tells a young paramedic never to do mouth-to-mouth because you'll end up with a mouthful of junkie puke. This is great advice to a paramedic. Don't ever give mouth-to-mouth. It's never necessary. Then he says he's a true coxman and that he doesn't mix his seed with white women.
It's important in that previous scene, though. I think Frank says he's never done mouth to mouth to somebody except a baby.
Yeah, except a baby. Yeah, that's true.
In some part, which also was funny. Like, wait, you're a paramedic, you've never done mouth to mouth to anybody except a baby.
I mean, they have that pump, so that makes sense. Like, they pushed that thing directly into the lungs. The whole thing with Rose was like that it went in her stomach instead of in her lungs. And if he would have done mouth to mouth in that situation, he would have saved her life. But instead, he just kept trying to push that tube in there.
But that also is why people puke when you do mouth to mouth. If you do it incorrectly, you don't tilt their head back, you'll blow air into their stomach, which causes their stomach to expand, and then they throw it back up. So it's one of the things you learn doing CPR.
Anyways, all of these guys seem like gentlemen of the highest order, especially our newly met Marcus, Soul Man Ving Rhames. Frank runs into Mary yet again while Larry washes gallons of blood out of the ambulance. And she just doesn't really seem to mind. She's just kind of like, well, that's the thing. She tells him her father is now in a coma. Then her mom comes out and says that the man in the coma isn't her husband. Which was, I guess, maybe he just doesn't look the same anymore. They showed him. I get that. I've seen, when somebody passes and you see them in a casket or something, it looks like a completely different person. Because if you believe in the soul and all that kind of stuff, or if you just believe that when all of the water isn't in your body anymore, your body's going to look a little different. Whichever.
And your muscles, all your muscles go slack, which changes your facial expression.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Then Frank escorts her into an ambulance covered in blood so they can give her a nice, comfy ride home. Like Larry just like says fuck it, and he's like, I don't know, I'm not doing it anymore. Just leaves the blood all over the ambulance, and then Mary's mom immediately jumps in there. This woman who's clearly had some trauma. Sure, just jump in this bloody ambulance.
Say when she gets in, she's like offering it. She's like, "Would you like some coffee? Yeah. I've got some cake at home or something."
Yeah, that's not the pie.
Might actually be what Frank needs is
some food.
Oh, that would be just imagine that scene in the movie. Lord, hold on, Mary's mom. I think you got the wrong idea. Larry drops Frank at home, where he explains that when things are going good on the job, it's the greatest feeling in the world, and that for a moment you are God when you save a life. All while having a drink shirtless and looking across a park, which is probably adjacent to the Vampire's Kiss therapist office. Somewhere there. It looks exactly the same. It's like the same fucking park.
Not the same thing. Somewhere out, Peter Lowe's out there wandering the streets, bloody.
Peter Lowe is dragging a stick somewhere. That'd be awesome. Here. Don't I know you? We see Frank wake up so that he can head to his nightmare job, while monologuing about how when someone dies, you need to shift the blame to anyone but yourself, or else you'll go crazy. Which is probably what the hell's going on with him this whole time. He's just completely bearing the brunt of the stress, which is kind of mentioned in the end by Mary. But we'll get there. Mm-hmm. Frank meets with his captain, where we find out Frank has been late for work a ton and keeps calling out sick, and then tries to quit, but the captain says that he's never fired anyone in his life, which explains a lot about the events that have transpired so far and the events that are about to come, and why these people that he keeps getting partnered up with are the way that they are, because captain refuses to fire anyone.
Yeah, Tom's not a
Then
HR
the captain barks at him.
Yeah, what?
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
The captain barks at him. Yeah. He barks at him like a dog. Not like a big dog. Like a chihuahua or something.
Yeah.
What the fuck was that about? Like, what in the hell?
The only explanation that I can try to logically come up with is that they're just trying to show that, like, literally everybody who works this job is insane in some way or another. And the captain just, that's his coping mechanism, is he barks like a dog randomly, which doesn't faze Frank, so clearly he does it.
He's seen it a lot, I'm sure.
Normal.
Yeah. Frank's like, oh, okay.
But even it's like,
introduce the character.
Yeah. He's even like, I can bark too, you know. Like, I mean, is he is it supposed to be like he's barking at him like he's a captain, and so he's barking orders at the guy, and it was just so fucking weird. I didn't get it.
I forgot about that.
I'm imagining it was like a line read where it's like, the captain barks an order at Frank, and the guy just reads it and thinks it said, the captain barks. So he just goes,
we got it, move on.
God damn it. It's so strange. The barking captain tells Frank that Larry called out, so he's saddled with Coxman Ving Rames, a.k.a. Marcus, for the night. Frank slams his fist into the captain's desk and tells him again to fire him, before reluctantly heading out to be the one person who stands between the people of New York and certain death. Just the guy I want responsible for saving my life in a crisis.
I was really hoping this was going to be the beginning of Nick Cage being Nick Cage.
I did too. I really thought that this was like, this is the turning point. Okay, he's going to go crazier and crazier. That's why they picked Nick Cage for this role. But no, not really. I mean, he has moments.
it's like, so I think they have like this, I'm just now realizing it when we talk about it, but it's like everybody else that he works with has some way to cope with what the hell is going on with the job. They're all older than him. They've got, they're crazy in one way or another. He doesn't have that, which is clearly what's causing him to have this mental breakdown, I think.
Yeah, John Goodman's got Chinese food. Vin Rames has Jesus. Tom Sizemore has beating the shit out of everybody.
Plans. Like Larry wants to be a chief in some other smaller precinct or whatever. Tom Sizemore's got beaten up hobos and racing to gunshot victims. Like he's just completely embraced the chaos of it and loves it and revels in it. And then Ving Rhames Marcus has Jesus. And likes feeling like a preacher, as we'll find out.
Act 2. Let's get some motivation up in this thing.
Next, we meet a beatboxing Asian nun with a bloody aborted fetus doll around her neck, who drops a sick beat on the street while Marcus tells sunken-eyed, cracked-out-looking Frank that he doesn't look so great. Quick fact, the subtitles and the credits identify this woman as Sister Fetus. That's her name.
Sister Fetus.
She's
sounds like a Marilyn Manson album or something.
Right. Or sing it to the tune of Sister Christian. Frank says he's been seeing ghosts, and Marcus reassures him that only crazy people see ghosts, but he'll get used to it. Then the guy who won't have sex with white women because he doesn't want to mix his seed and refuses to do mouth-to-mouth even though he's a paramedic says Frank just needs to embrace Jesus. Suddenly, Queen Latifah pops on the radio, and Marcus does his best Barry White impression to make her jealous, and then starts singing instead of heading to help a guy who's dying from a cardiac arrest that the dispatcher's trying to send him to. Starting to see why Mr. Burke was dead too long to save.
They all seem to share this not real urgency to get to these calls. Like, I don't know if I want this one. I guess we'll do it. Not like time is of the essence,
Don't you dare answer that radio. They head to a nightclub full of extras from the Matrix movies where they meet I.B. Bangin'. There's a character in the movie named I.B. Bangin', and he looks like a goth Anakin Skywalker. He's apparently in a band when the rest of the group asks if he's okay, Marcus, a trained paramedic sent as the last hope for their dying friend lying on the floor, says, without examining the dude at all, that this dude is dead.
This dude is dead.
Frank explains that he's not dead after checking his pulse, like a paramedic should do. And then Marcus busts into a sermon for some damn reason to these coked out assholes who argue amongst themselves why their buddy OD'd on Red Death. Marcus Luther King Jr. does a holy sermon while Frank injects Narcan into I.B. Bangin's wrist.
The whole sentence is ludicrous. The whole sentence is fucking ludicrous.
He does. He says it like he's like a Southern Baptist sermon thing. I was like, it's Marcus Luther King Jr.
Do I be Bangin's wrist?
Quick fact, when Frank and Marcus use Narcan on I.B. Bangin', Frank injects the Narcan into one of the wrist veins. Drugs are never mainlined without a patient IV because possible infiltration of the drug would cause tissue damage. If an IV can't be established, Narcan's given either intramuscularly or intranasally.
Thought that was a nice little fun fact of the guys who spent days with paramedics.
I didn't know that, and apparently neither did they.
Yeah.
IP Freely wakes up and thanks. IP Freely wakes up thanks to Marcus's song and dance, and the Matrix extras convert to Jesus or something. They just leave him. They're like, all right, he's back and fine. Don't need to take this OD to the hospital to get checked out. He'd probably go right back to doing drugs and then died again.
Give him a cup of soup or something.
Give him some OJ.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Back at Horror Hospital, Frank asks the doctor what's happened to Mr. Burke, who tells him that he's showing signs of cognition, but he's had to be brought back to life 11 times since he arrived because his heart won't stabilize. Frank uses this as an excuse to head over to Mary's house and tell her the good news that her father is kind of not a vegetable anymore, but still probably going to die. Seriously. He's counted 11 times. They just keep shocking him back.
Yeah, the amount of times they bring this guy back is just ridiculous, because like, another time they're like, it's been 14 times tonight or something like that.
Yeah.
Like,
Just tonight.
how could that possibly be healthy? Like, you're shocking the shit out of this guy.
Yeah, his heart is going to die from that.
Yeah.
He lets her know the amazing news and then hits on her some more before taking her to the hospital to the sound of Martin Scorsese's mixtape blaring over the images of Mary banging her head on the wall of the ambulance. With a rough ride like this, it's a wonder why every person transported in the back of these ambulances doesn't die.
Her head just keeps slamming into that thing.
Yeah.
And then they're like kind of just smiling amongst each other.
Yeah, it's a really long take
real
of them
romantic.
just chilling in this.
Yeah. I was wondering
Probably
if
still blood everywhere.
I was wondering if that was something that was unintentional, them laughing together. 'Cause she just keeps banging her head, and then he starts smiling. She looks over, then she starts smiling.
I mean, they weren't married at the time.
Yeah.
It would make sense. I feel like in the behind the scenes, they said that they had never worked together before, had never actually acted in anything together. So it was probably cool for them at the time until they're divorced 2 years later.
And you said, right, Nicolas Cage wanted her to be in Vampire's Kiss, right?
Yep. Yeah, he wanted her to play Rachel, which went to Mrs. Flashdance herself.
At the hospital, Mr. Burke shows more signs of life. He has a fit and starts trying to pull the tube out of his throat. So Frank uses the horrifying images of her father grasping at life to take her for a romantic dinner in the break room. I didn't get that. As I said, he's supposed to be brain dead, but he's awake. Like, he's waking up and trying to pull, and they mentioned he's done it before, like trying to pull the tube out. And it just seemed like that's more than just a reflex that somebody would be having if they were brain dead. Like, it's like they're trying to set up that he's recovering, like he's coming back to life. Is what I think they were trying to do with it. Like, against all odds, he's showing more than just signs of brain death. Like,
well, as I
which I guess
sort
becomes
of
more
mentioned,
important toward the climax of the movie. But
as I sort of mentioned, when the stethoscope was bouncing off his face, I just feel like the guy wasn't really able to like fully, embrace that. Like, I'm a corpse in this movie. He's just like the whole time he's kind of fully lucid in every moment.
I don't know if
every
it was
moment that he's on screen.
Like,
Yeah.
To me, it was like I like they're clearly he shouldn't be having. I don't know. It was a weird not juxtaposition. It was just maybe a continuity problem that like he's not as comatose as they keep saying he is, but they keep going out of their way to say what rough shape he's in.
Yeah, I have heard of this phenomenon before, where like patients will try and like pull that tube out without even knowing that they're doing it. In their sleep and stuff, but it's more of kind of like you're just kind of pushing it out of your face. Kind of like if you were sleeping and like somebody was like, you had something like tickling your neck, you would probably push it out of the way. It's just kind of like a reflex.
During a scene featuring several baffling fade cuts back and forth that only focus on Mary, she tells Frank that Noelle lived at her house for almost a year at one point, and they reminisce about how great the clearly god-awful neighborhood is that they grew up in. I don't know if you guys saw that too, but there's these weird fades.
Yeah.
And while Frank was talking, like she wasn't even talking, it just faded back and forth like 4 times on her. I've never seen it in any movie before, and I don't know what the purpose of it was.
I had a really hard time trying to figure out what was the intent of those fades, because usually there's an intent behind crossfades like that.
Right.
Like, I have no idea. I really don't.
It doesn't show up anywhere else. It's just. It doesn't seem like it was pertinent to what they were talking about. It was really weird.
Yeah.
Frank says he's been on the job for 5 years and is divorced. Mary says she used to be a junkie. You know, the kind of usual getting to know you chit chat over break room pizza. Frank says people tend to open up to him because his mother always said, I look like a priest.
My mother always said, I look like a priest.
You do.
You do. That was a weird exchange of like, he does?
Yeah, it was.
I mean, maybe they saw Face Off.
I was going to say, clearly she saw Face Off.
Mary confides that her mom thought she was going to be a nun since she ran away to a convent once, but it turns out she just doesn't like being held down in one place. As you do. I don't know why you'd run to a convent if you wanted to break free of the world, but
It's an escape, I guess.
it was like the
kind of like going
thrill
into
of
the
chase,
army or
maybe.
something. Yeah. That's kind of what I thought.
Back in the ambulance, Marcus scolds Frank for getting involved with the patient's daughter, which causes Nick Cage to speak jive back to him.
What about rule number 3? Don't get involved with dispatchers named Love. Now, boy, you don't know nothing about rule number 3.
It's one of the few like Nick Cage moments.
Yeah.
You know, they're just peppered in.
What about rule number 3?
Marcus, uber Christian that he is, suggests they go look at some hookers, and then rolls past them holding up a wad of money while Frank continues to break down from the unending nightmare that is his reality. He explains that his training is only useful in 10% of the calls, and that he's mostly there as a grief mop, and realizes now that his job is less about saving lives and more about bearing witness to people's dying moments, which I think was linking to the priest thing. Like, priests deliver absolution, last rites and stuff. They're just sort of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again was, I think, the juxtaposition of like paramedics are supposed to save lives, but he views himself now as just like the guy who's there while they die.
Yeah.
And that's his main purpose in life.
Yeah, I mean,
sees
it
another
makes sense
vision.
that like only 10% of their training is, you know, even used whatsoever on the calls, and most of the time they're just kind of like, it's already too late.
Yeah, that's something else I remember from CPR class when they taught CPR. They were like, you know, this probably won't work, but you don't get discouraged. But yeah, even paramedics don't ever revive a lot of people with CPR. So
Yeah.
it's less about like bringing them back to life and more about just keeping blood circulating till they can get to a doctor who can then hook them up to machines and do more, you know?
One little fun fact that I learned not super long ago that I felt like they did really well in this movie is that once there is no heartbeat anymore, doing the shockers doesn't do anything. Like it.
Nope. Yeah,
it's
they're called
pointless.
defibrillators. Yeah, because fibrillation is when your heart erratically beats out of sync, and that's all that those defibrillators do is they defibrillate and they shock it and reset it back to the thump 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 that a heart's supposed to do. So that's why a lot of times people have heart attacks. They don't like pass out or whatever. Their heart's just beating, you know, irrhythmically and stuff, which they're still conscious for. It just doesn't pump blood properly, which is why it hurts and all that shit. And
Once
I
you
don't know why
flatline,
that's
you're
one
not,
of those.
They can't bring
once
you
you
back up.
flatline, they can maybe give you a spike of adrenaline to kickstart your heart back up, but it usually doesn't work. I don't know why that is such a prevailing myth that's been in movies for decades now and has never really been addressed. It's like you still see it. I don't know. It's just one of those things, like the visualness of like clear and then like shocking the person back to life. I don't know. It's one of those pet peeves that every time a movie does it now, I just hate it because it's just so it's just not real.
I feel like it comes
even
from
in a movie about paramedics.
I think it comes from a lot of people who write movies only know medical things through movies and watching TV shows and stuff. So they think, they must have done their research. So,
but you think now at this point, like nobody says it's not something that's done. There's people that do continuity. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a trope.
Maybe it's the rule of cool. You know, it looks cool, so they do it.
Yeah.
It was even in frickin' King Kong versus Godzilla. Like,
oh, spoilers, dude!
Not that King Kong versus Godzilla is some pinnacle of filmmaking, but
I think they differ. You shut your whore mouth.
He sees another vision of Rose on the street but asks him why he killed her, and then answers to her out loud, prompting Marcus to notice that Frank's a little on edge, talking to himself. Rather than suggest the guy responsible, rather than suggest the guy responsible for saving people who is seeing ghosts and hearing voices take the night off, Marcus asks what the voices are saying, and Frank says,
They say kill Marcus, okay?
so he's hearing voices that are now telling him to kill it. And Marcus doesn't think anything of it. They get a call about another cardiac arrest, and Frank flips out because every call seems to be someone dying rather than something a little less horrible. Meanwhile, 70s music blares in the background. They arrive at a crack house, which... this is what I didn't get. They arrive at a crack house where Marcus is shocked to see a fat crackhead. It turns out she's pregnant and about to give birth, which doesn't seem like cardiac arrest at all, so I don't know why they sent them there, why the cardiac arrest thing happened.
Well, the guy didn't know that it was a pregnancy.
Oh, that's right.
Because they were both virgins, and so he was like, she's having a heart attack or something. I'm sure it was the call.
Yeah.
The guy she's with explains they're both virgins, so she can't be pregnant, and doesn't believe she is until some bloody feet pop out of her vagina. I love that. She's having a baby, and he's like, I can't, it's not possible. It's not possible. It's possible. It's possible.
See, look at the feet.
See those feet?
Turns out this lady's having twins. Marcus delivers the boy, who is fine, but Frank delivers the girl, who isn't breathing. They rush her to the hospital, where Nick Cage kisses her over and over again like a pervert. He gives it mouth to mouth for a minute, but sadly the baby doesn't make it. This causes Frank to spiral a bit further down into insanity as he once again loses a patient. Meanwhile, Marcus is elated that they just saved a little baby boy.
Hey, what's worse than 10 dead babies in a tree? One dead baby in 10 trees. Oh my God. What's the difference between a dead baby and a Mars bar? About 20 calories.
Back in the ambulance, Marcus and Frank decide to knock back a few, but when a call comes in, Frank begs Marcus not to take it. Marcus guns it and flips the ambulance, which means Marcus is either a terrible driver or a lightweight because he's had a small amount of alcohol in a hospital cup like 20 seconds before flipping the van over a car.
They hadn't been drinking at all up to that point.
No, they made it seem like they were just completely hammered and partying, but they really just started.
Well, let's go, and then flips the freaking ambulance. I don't know if you've seen those little ambulance cups, but they're like this big. They hold no liquid whatsoever.
I know.
It's like one of those little coffee cups.
I thought it was going to be a delusion. Like this is some mental thing he was, and then it would cut back to them driving towards the next. But nope, he flipped that fucking van.
It actually happened, and it's like never addressed in the rest of the movie again.
Both of them just fine.
I thought it was gonna be like, oh shit, the whole movie just flipped. You know, they're gonna be horribly injured in this thing, and then like, nah, it just. They didn't know how to end the scene, so they flipped the ambulance over and moved on.
It just felt so kind of pointless in the grand scheme of things. It was just like, we got to add something in here to make it a little bit more, keep people on edge, and then and then Marcus disappears, and we don't see him again for the rest of the movie, if I remember right. Same as Larry, who after the first act, we don't see him again.
We see Larry once more, only in
a flashback.
But other than that, he doesn't return. Yeah.
Frank climbs out of the destroyed ambulance laughing like a nutcase, tells Marcus he quits, and just walks off bleeding into the night.
Hey, he and Noel have something in common.
Yeah.
Frank heads to the hospital to quit when he runs into Noel and Mary. Mary apparently let Noel go, which prompts Gris to come outside to thank her because otherwise he would have killed him. You and me both, Gris. You and me both. Frank creepily follows Mary and is hilariously disgusted by some school children along the way. I think we can all identify.
Did you guys see that? He was just like,
I didn't catch it.
He's just like walking through them and like, disgusting. That might be my favorite Cage moment of the whole movie, and I don't think it was scripted whatsoever. He's just kind of disgusted by children.
Maybe it's like he never sees them because he's always out at night doing things. And, maybe it was like, because they were all a bunch of teenage girls, right? So maybe he saw Rose again, and we didn't actually see Rose through his eyes this time.
True.
Maybe. I don't know. It was really funny.
Mary freaks out about waiting for hours for news about her dad and listening to Noel screaming. So she does what we would all do when we're feeling a little frazzled, heads into a nearby building to do some crack. Again, I think we can identify. Frank follows her in and quickly makes friends with her drug dealer, Cy Coates, who turns out is a pretty chill guy. He's a pretty cool character.
Yeah.
I kept expecting him to be like some horrible guy, but he's like just like one of the nicest guys in the movie.
Yeah, he really is.
He may or may not have
person.
shot. He may or may not have shot Noel in the head, causing him to be the lunatic that he is now.
Oh, right, that was him.
That is mentioned at one point.
Yeah, but again, it's Noel, so
He wasn't so chill back then.
He's relaxed.
in the narrative of this movie, he's pretty cool. Like in the events that we see in this, whatever he did years prior, whatever. He introduces Frank to his buddy Tiger, who's a fat guy with a bloody nose. This Tiger is presumably the same Tiger who shot and killed Frank's patient the previous night. Because they talk about how he's trying to stop Red Death from getting dealt along the streets. Mm-hmm. They chat about Frank's job and pass around a joint while Frank cries to himself. And then Cy gives Frank a pill to help him sleep for a couple hours. As you do.
Yeah.
Frank pops the pill and nods off to an insane dream filled with some terrible racist surf music, a guy with no legs crawling across the sidewalk, Frank pulling the ghosts of people he has saved out of a cobblestone street, and some more goddamn 70s music blaring in the background. Next, we see a crazy sequence where everything plays in reverse, except for Frank's ambulance and people who were filmed walking backwards, but reversed, so it's extra creepy.
I actually really thought this was a cool sequence. Sorry, I totally blocked you off, but I thought this was like probably the coolest like filmmaking kind of like experiment in the whole movie. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it looked awesome. Mm-hmm. Snow falls up in a pretty cool visual effect, and there are hanging slabs of meat all around for some reason. Because it was cool, because nowadays they'd just CG it so that the snow was falling up, and they would just film it, whatever, but they had to do it all in reverse.
I love like
this creepy factor.
Especially Rose's movements, it just makes it so spooky, like the way that she's like, I don't know, just her weird walk was unsettling. Which, you would expect from a weird drug-induced dream,
Yeah. We see what really went down with Rose. It turns out she had an asthma attack, and Frank accidentally put the air tube into her stomach instead of her lungs. Before we can see how her story ended, Frank's dream is shattered by Frank back in the drug den, screaming his ever-loving head off. He pounds on his legs and, in more of a handicapped kid looking for a snack type of scream, heads down the hallway, grabs Mary, and carries her out of the building.
Frank, where are you going? You're making a mistake. Yeah, you go.
It was so like that was not what Martin Scorsese told Nick Cage to do. Like as he's going down the hallway, it was so good.
And as he's leaving, Cy's like, "Hey, you owe me $10."
Yeah,
but in like a cool way, not like a come back here or I'll shoot you in the knees.
Yeah,
give me like $10 away. Just say whenever you can get it to me, just get me those $10.
When your check comes in, Frank, hit me up.
Mary comes to outside and gets tangled up with Nick Cage's stethoscope for way longer than if it was intentional. That's great. They stumble out of the building, and Mary tells Frank about how Noel was her brother's best friend, but became this charming self after being shot in the head by either Cy, the chill drug dealer, or Tiger, the fat guy with a bloody nose. Back at Mary's place, Frank invites himself in, saunters behind her up the stairs, and she asks what we're all thinking.
You want to fuck me? Everyone else has.
I love that line so much, man.
That's what you want to hear your wife say to you.
You want to fuck me? Everybody else has. That's fucking gold writing right there.
Yeah.
In Mary's place, Frank passes out on the couch and then washes his face over and over with Mary's decorative soaps. Frank explains that he's turned a corner and decides to head back to work. I guess all he needed was a nice drug-induced nightmare nap. Well, that's one of his things. Like, he just needs sleep. That's he's mentioned it throughout the movie. He can't sleep anymore.
He does say that when he passed out in her place, that it was the best sleep that he'd had in years. So I feel like just, between the nightmare nap and his sleeping at Mary's place, he kind of finally got the rest that he wanted or that he needed to actually get back on the job. But it is immediately like back to his bad, horrible nightmare world. Like as soon as he shows back up for work. So
it doesn't last very long.
It doesn't last long at all.
Yeah.
But it's enough to get him to go back to work, I guess, instead of quitting.
Well, yeah, he gets to hang out with Tom Sizemore now.
Yeah. Such a fun guy.
Who wouldn't want to do that?
Act 3. Time to resolve some shit.
Frank gets teamed up with Psycho Tom for the night, but decides to take a quick pit stop before heading out. He heads over to have a nice little schizophrenic chat with Mr. Burke. His comatose body explains that he's had enough and not to let him live. Frank then heads down to the ambulance where he gives himself some oxygen and a fun little cocktail mix in an IV bag to get himself going for the night, which really makes me think he's turned the corner. And wouldn't you know it, 70s music blares in the background.
I didn't get what his coping mechanism is now just going to be a drug cocktail or something.
I guess.
I don't know. He had his mind opened at Si's place, and now he's like wants more of that sweet release.
It's funny because he's like, I turned a corner. Everything's going to be fine. I'm going back to work. And then he shows up and has a schizophrenic chat with a comatose patient and then immediately goes into the ambulance and fucking drugs himself up so that he can...
I'm sick, Tom.
He can get himself going.
And Tom doesn't even blink.
Tom's like, oh, okay. Hey, fix me up one of those when you're done. They arrive at their first call, a tunnel filled with junkies walking around like zombies and a pretty white horse.
What the hell was with that goddamn horse? What the fuck,
That's one of my couple of questions.
I had the same question. I mean, I think that it was supposed to signify something, but what, like... Just think of the logistics of getting that horse for that scene. Like, what the fuck? Why was...
Like, it's like the chief barking like a dog in levels of inexplicability, but so much more elaborate and complicated to do for a gag. I don't understand what the point of it was.
Symbolism of some sort.
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, it's not like this is Blade Runner and it's the unicorn or something. Like, what are you trying to symbolize?
Maybe that horse was already there.
Yeah, like white horse is usually like hope or freedom, that kind of stuff. And like his hope or freedom from his life is to go be a hobo in a tunnel. I don't understand. Go live with the Morlocks. Like that's his way out.
God damn it, Nigel. Grab people.
These are the things that I thought when I saw it. Just like, I know, I was like, they're not even going to make a joke about like there's a fucking horse there or something. Like that would also fit in the movie if they were just like, maybe there's a fucking horse over here.
Yeah, see that? Yeah, that's something Tom would say.
Where'd they get a fucking horse?
Yeah, nope, never mentioned.
There, he would be like, how much to fuck the horse?
It's against Jesus, but whatever. I'm off duty.
All right, so the homeless people explain that their friend tried to kill himself. The whole time, Frank is occupied asking these guys, who live in a tunnel that probably reeks of shit and crack, whether they have any coffee. Coffee? You
guys got any coffee?
Got any coffee? I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I'd want to drink coffee from a fucking crack den.
Hobo coffee.
A hobo coffee. the name of our band.
It's probably no more disgusting than the coffee at that frickin' nightmare hospital that they have to go in and out of.
Is it touche? You make a good point. Tom shows some compassion for once and tries to convince the guy that wearing a patch on his head will cure him from wanting to kill himself. Frank, on the other hand, says that this guy's suicide attempt is the worst he's ever seen and tells him the proper way to kill yourself. Then offers the dude a knife so he can finish the job. So, yeah, I think Frank's all better now.
Yeah. He's good.
I mean, he kind of is. Like, if we go with the theory that he needs a coping mechanism, like everybody else has.
Assisted suicide?
His coping mechanism is just telling people that they need to kill themselves.
Holy fuck, I think you hit it
I
on the
don't give
head.
a fuck anymore.
Yeah, it's like
his
he's
coping
embraced the absurdity of it.
Yeah.
He's becoming the Grim Reaper.
That's what the
Also,
White Horse
yeah,
is
and-
about. Death has arrived.
Pale white horse. Oh
Pale
my,
white horse.
yeah.
There you go. There
We
you go.
cracked the code, guys. The homeless guy admits that he doesn't actually want to die, and Frank tells him he makes him sick as Tom laughs hysterically. Just such a fucked up scene.
Oh, it's so bad. Bad as in awful, not bad as in badly done. Just real shit you wouldn't
like-
want to hear from a paramedic, you know?
Character
No.
reversal too, because
Yeah.
like Frank or Tom is the one being all compassionate and trying to like give this guy
Yeah.
okay, let's try and stop this guy from killing himself for a couple of nights by making him feel like a low placebo effect or something. Frank's like, just fucking kill yourself, and then Tom's like, ah!
Not across, down.
Maybe Scorsese on the night was just like, fuck it, do the roles in reverse. So let's just have Tom play Frank and Frank play Tom, just for this one scene.
This one scene.
I'm bored.
Internet weirdos will be confused about it 20 years from now on the internet.
They finally grab some coffee, but the Java doesn't work its magic as we see Frank giving us his best 1,000-yard stare while seeing Rose's ghost on the street again. They head back out into the night, and Frank drives like a cracked-out Dale Earnhardt to the sounds of, you guessed it, 70s music blaring in the background. Tom begins to think maybe there's something wrong with Frank, but quickly dismisses his fears when Frank says he's never felt better despite looking like a Holocaust victim who hasn't slept in weeks. A call comes in on the radio for their ambulance, which is 66 X-ray, and Frank answers with a sultry and seductive,
First of all,
I can't do it justice. I can't do it justice. It is so good.
I will say here that I really enjoyed the visual degradation of Frank as the movie went along.
Yeah.
Like, throughout the 3 nights, he gets more and more gaunt. His stubble actually grows out, if you notice that. He's clean shaven the first night. He's got a 5 o'clock shadow the second night, and he's got even more of it on the third night. While his eyes get more and more sunken and gaunt, like, as you'd expect somebody who probably hasn't eaten or drank anything in 3 days and just did a drug bender.
And at this point in the film, like, Scorsese-isms start to play in. So, like, you start to see when it's from Frank's perspective, everything around him starting to kind of blur on the edges. And then like back, I forgot to mention this, but back when they're walking into the hobo camp, there's a lot of X's. There's a lot of structures with X's, which is something Scorsese loves to throw in when he's talking about death. Yeah, pretty much like the death of a character or death following that character. I mean, it was all over The Departed and a couple of his other films. You'll see he has X's that kind of then transition into like a death scene or like death being present in character's life.
Yeah. I wonder if that's why this is called the 66 X-ray ambulance.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. They head to help a suicidal jumper who is conveniently being lit by a couple of Hasidic Jews with a spotlight, which I'm assuming every neighborhood in New York comes with a pair. Thankfully, the beatboxing nun is dropping science nearby, so I'm sure everything will be all right.
What the fuck? It felt like a scene out of like Airplane or something. The cops mentioned like they paid the Jews to hold the spotlight or something.
And then you got Sister Fetus over there dropping some beats.
Yeah.
Sister Fetus.
I think that's where it actually calls her Sister Fetus in the subtitle.
Really?
I didn't see it earlier in the movie, but There's
That's
a couple
incredible.
of parts where it's like Sister Fetus, and then like it specifically says Sister Fetus is the one talking.
That's awesome. It turns out that this is the drug den Frank was in earlier, and things are decidedly less chill. Cy, the drug dealer, his girl is dead in the hall with a bullet in her head. Inside, the place is ransacked. Tiger, the fat guy with the bloody nose, jumped out of a window to a lower apartment, breaking both legs before jumping through a window and passing out. Cy, on the other hand, got impaled on the deck's railing during his attempt to flee, and despite having this iron rod sticking through him, Cy is still pretty chill.
Yeah. Pretty damn chill.
Sounds some good stuff.
Whatever size on, that's what I want, man.
Yeah, nothing phases the guy.
So relaxed.
So relaxed. Frank tells Cy he hasn't damaged anything major, but that they have to cut him off the railing with a blowtorch as the crowd on the street screams for the cops to let him fall. Because that's what you want to hear as you're dangling 30 stories above the fucking street.
I get the feeling that this guy who runs the crack den is not well liked in the neighborhood.
No, the cops are trying to kill him. The crowd is trying to kill him.
He's their Nino Brown for this movie from New Jack City.
Yeah. Not sure if Tom was the one holding him. He would have just... They have a good talk while Frank caresses Cy's head lovingly. They watch the sparks fly, and Cy professes his love for the city that has been painted as a horrific nightmare with every scene thus far. Cy nearly falls as the railing comes loose, but thankfully our hero, Frank, saves him. I do have to say, that was actually a pretty beautiful moment when he's talking about his love for the city and the fireworks are going off, and you see
red, white, and blue fireworks.
Yeah, red, white, and blue, and then I think it's the Empire State Building in the background that's lit up with red, white, and blue.
One of those. Yeah. I don't. It seemed a little overt on Scorsese's part.
Yeah, but it's a nice. Well, I don't know. He always likes to fix in on icons of cities, like certain icons, but I guess in this film, it's the only time he really touches base about the actual architecture in the city. Everything else is just hobos and underpasses and crack dens and all that shit. Yeah. So it's nice
the
to see
the shitty part of New York. I was just going to say, it's sort of the same thing that they were talking about in Vampire's Kiss, where like if everything's going well, New York's amazing, but when it's not, it's the worst place in the world. Yeah. Which obviously every moment of this movie, it's the worst place in the world.
Yeah. It was a nice break from that chaos that had been painted throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
They take him to the hospital where he thanks Frank for saving his life and tells him, don't worry about that $10.
Yeah, it's pretty chill.
Yeah, it's pretty chill. Frank then heads over to Mr. Burke for another schizophrenic chat. Mr. Burke again tells him to just let him die. Frank has a good chuckle when the doctors tell him they had to shock this guy back to life 14 times that night. How many fingers have I? 14 times. And he's like,
what are you going to attach a defibrillator to him, send it home with him?
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, we might have to do that. Pacemaker works.
Yeah, pretty much.
To a paramedic that would presumably know how a pacemaker works. But.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this man's losing his mind, so
I guess
the medical facts are just gone. Frank heads out and has a smoke with Mary, where she tells him that she was weak and won't do drugs again. Pinky promises him. He tries to cheer her up by quietly staring at her for a long time before saying, "We're all dying, Mary Burke." He strokes her face in a super creepy manner and kisses her on the temple, then heads off back into the night.
That was so weird. I mean, I guess it was just like, oh, we've been through a thing, so now I can just grope you and kiss you on the side of the face.
Yeah, it was
that whole drug thing we went through.
Creepy. Yeah, it was a very creepy moment. He and Tom get a call, and
but
Frank
I think it was supposed to not be creepy.
Yeah, it was supposed to. It was supposed to be like romantic, and like you said, they're sharing a moment because they've been through this tragedy together, and then it just comes off as creepy.
Really creepy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He and Tom get a call, and Frank chugs whiskey before seeing Rose's ghost in every person he sees on the street as 70s music blares in the background. Frank is freaking out now and says he wants to break some windows while Tom throws some racial slurs at a cab driver, you know, just to add more fun to this wacky night. I felt like that was very accurate. Of all the things in this movie, that I 100% believe an ambulance driver leaning out his window and just hurling racial slurs at a cabbie. Especially in the 90s.
Again, that was probably just Tom Sizemore. He probably wasn't even scripted.
Martin's like, you can't harass the extras like that, Tom. You told me to be me.
They just say the first thing that popped into my head.
They spot Crazy Noel on the street again. He's smashing windows. What a crazy... Hold on, let me... Hold on. He's smashing windows.
What a crazy night.
He's smashing windows. What a crazy coincidence. Of cars for the fun of it. So Tom decides they should beat the shit out of him, which makes total sense to me. Frank decides to go along with it and even ends up busting out a window with Noel, his old pal, looking on like a proud papa. Noel spots Tom and takes off. Frank reluctantly gives chase while coming to his senses. Inside the building is a homeless den full of people sleeping and sobbing, the usual sights and sounds of New York City. I love when he walks in and he looks over and there's just some eyes staring out from fucking trash bags.
It was a real the movie does it a couple of times, but it was a real descent into hell trope where he goes down out of the light. There's he even as he's walking down, he's well lit from a street light above him, a glow, and he goes down into this darkness. So there's just
darkness,
the horrible
chaos.
shit going on.
Yeah.
Frank sees Rose's ghost yet again and explains to her that he wanted to help her, but is awoken from his vision by the sounds of Tom beating the living shit out of Noel with a bat. Frank pushes Tom off of him, then tries to save his life since his incredible partner pretty much bashed the dude's head in. Frank decides saving Noel's life is worth the potential junkie puke that might fill his mouth from giving Noel mouth-to-mouth. After a short, sensual session of mouth-to-mouth, Frank is able to revive Noel. They rush him to the hospital to ensure his life will be saved.
Thus completing the character arc. He can now do CPR or mouth-to-mouth on an adult.
Yeah. Character development never stops for Frank. After securing Noel, Frank heads upstairs to check on Old Man Burke, who is now in the ICU. Fun fact, the ICU is surprisingly staffed by Carla from Scrubs, in a role that's slightly less zany and amusing than her romp as a sitcom nurse a couple years later.
Yeah.
I did a double take and then had to look it up. What? The nurse from Scrubs?
Yeah, I popped up the menu on Amazon and to see if it was her, and I was like, oh, okay. I guess she has a type. She gets typecast.
Yep.
Frank hears.
I saw you in that Bringing Out the Dead movie. I was the one person who saw that. Let's put you in this.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, you and Cliff Curtis is great.
Did they pay you? No, just in the Scrubs. Well, do I have an offer for you? Frank hears Mr. Burke's voice, and it again tells him to kill him. So Frank, with sensors already on his chest for some reason, switches Mr. Burke's wires and air hose over to him so that they read his vitals instead, giving Mr. Burke time to die without alerting any of the nurses. What the fuck? They just that's just
a little
acceptable.
Premeditated murder.
Yeah, because he had him on him already. He had the markers on him, so he was going down there with the intent to do that.
Yeah,
but it's just weird. They go from him saving Noel to now all of a sudden going, and he's already got this shit on him. I don't know. It was just a little bit of a
he knows that the soul doesn't want to go back into the body, so he just
torturing him.
Lets him go.
He's tortured by the people that he can't save, and he's tortured by the one guy that he did save.
He did
shouldn't have saved. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things, the problems I have with the movie. It's just it kind of muddles it by having both.
It does. Although, we learned that he's okay with murder now, or assisted suicide, you can call it.
Yeah. I have a working theory that I'll get talked about later. But
Awesome.
that I've just kind of come up with as we've talked about this. So
Nice.
Man.
Once Mr. Burke is dead, Frank hooks the wires back up to him and pretends to do CPR. Finally, old man Burke gets the death that Frank imagined he would have wanted in his drug, alcohol, and sleep-deprived induced psychosis, leaving Frank feeling like he did something good for someone. Nothing like a little premeditated murder to put giddy up back in your step. Outside, Tom smashes out the lights on his own ambulance while screaming at it to die, 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 son of a bitch, die, die, die. Frank then heads over to Mary's place to tell her the good news.
Earlier in the movie, when he meets up with Tom mentions the ambulance is like whatever. He's been with this ambulance for years and he hasn't managed to kill her, even though he's tried. So I guess he's trying to finally kill the ambulance for some reason.
Well, he couldn't kill Noel.
So
he's got to kill something.
I was wondering if maybe this was like him kind of coming to his senses of like, God, I almost killed somebody, and then him trying to like maybe knock himself out of the game for the next night or something. So it's maybe Tom developing as a character like, oh shit, I could have actually killed that guy.
Right.
It's been enough to this point to beat the shit out of people, but I almost killed someone. Oh my God.
Or as I like to interpret,
until they almost die.
Or as I like to interpret, they were originally shooting Nick leaving the hospital, and Tom was just out there having a good old time on his own time.
Man, Vin got the flip one. Vin got to crash one of them, and I don't get to do anything. Smash this one with that baseball bat.
Back to Mary. She's not super surprised, but then transforms into Rose's ghost, which marks, I think, 75 times that's happened in this movie. Rose's ghost tells him, it's not your fault. No one asked you to suffer. That was your idea. This conversation gives Frank the closure that we, Star Wars fans, were never given with our Rose ghost. 100%. That's only in there for you, Nigel. I tried so hard I shoehorned that in just for you. It's the worst joke ever, but if it made you laugh, it's a win. When she switches back to being Mary, Frank tells her that Noel was injured, but he'll be okay thanks to him. She asks him to come in, and he falls asleep in her arms before being lit up like an angel. A poignant moment that would have only been made better if it was punctuated by some blaring 70s music off in the distance. The end.
Do you think the whole time that he was having that like weird interaction with Rose's ghost, he was actually talking to Mary, and Mary's like, what the fuck is going on?
I thought so, but then I thought she let him into the apartment. Because we've seen earlier when he talks to Rose, Marcus hears him and is like, what? Yeah. So it's like he's obviously talking to himself.
Yeah.
But, she lets him in anyway, because why not?
Why not?
I
mean, everybody else
some
has
cigarettes and some drugs.
Presumably he went there to tell her her dad just died. So
yeah, that's what he was there for.
To just invite him in.
Yeah,
come on in.
Why wouldn't you?
You want to fuck me? Everybody else has.